Hello, this is Albert Dahm back again for talk number 3 of Dante's Divine Comedy. And hopefully this will be a even better one than the second one. I've got my non-squeaking chair here and I've continually learned a few things. I'm still not entirely sure how the videos will turn out. I got a couple of them and I'm going to do them a little differently than I did last week, which might improve them, but they're a little complex in the sense that they are YouTube videos embedded in a YouTube video. So we will continue, and I'm learning things. One thing I learned in this week is to be very careful with the clear button. This is in fact my second attempt to record this. My first attempt was wiped out when I hit the wrong button, and I was very upset. In fact, I almost bought myself a ticket to the Circle of the Wrathful in the Divine Comedy. With that being said, let us now go to our talk for this week. We are at the gate of hell, and Dante and Virgil, and we are looking at the inscription. An inscription that reads in English, "Through me the road to the city of desolation. Through me the road to sorrows that are eternal. Through me the road among the lost creation. Justice moved my great maker, God eternal, wrought me. The power and the unsearchably high wisdom and the primal love supernal. Nothing ere I was made to be, save things eternal, and I eternal abide. Lay down all hope, you that go in by me." Now, needless to say, Dante is a little concerned here, and he says, well, you know what? Now, of course, obviously paraphrasing and inventing here. Maybe those animals weren't so bad after all. Maybe I just try my luck with the leopard and the lion and the wolf. And Virgil says, basically, you got to trust me. Just it'll work out. The inscription at the gates of hell the inscription is rather important in that it signifies that God made hell. It is a creation, not an independent entity. As Christians, we do not believe in the dualism, which is an idea of independent forces of good and evil battling it out. We believe there's only really one force in the universe, and that's God, and that's good. Evil is simply a perverted or distorted good that ultimately depends on the good. And thus, hell is a place of God's justice. And without hell, sinners who deserve punishment would not face justice. And God's mercy would also be hidden, since none would be punished and therefore none saved. The justice of hell is important because hell must be just to show that God's judgment is just. And this is a hard concept for us to really grasp. And it's one that Dante has an evolution throughout hell, from a decisive pity of the sinners to deeper on understanding that the judgment of God is correct. So, how does Dante make hell just in his concept? And the process is contrapassio, where the sinners become embodiment of the sins that they committed while living. And we're going to talk about that in a little more detail in just a minute, since this is a decisive, important concept to understanding what Dante is doing in Inferno and to some degree in Purgatory. But for the moment, let's go back to Virgil and the Pilgrim Dante. And Dante is a little concerned about going through the gate of hell, as we said. And Virgil encourages him. He says, well, I told you you're going to expect this place. Here you shall pass among the fallen people, souls who have lost the good of intellect. The good of intellect could mean God. God is the good of intellect. But perhaps more roundly, as we look at the sinners, it is the fact that their intellect is darkened or destroyed. They've lost the good of reason. And the process that they managed to do this with is the sin itself, which they've chosen sin over rationality. And we'll see this particularly in the first few circles of hell, where the will of the person has been chained to their sin. Here's a map of the upper hell, the sins of incontinence, the sins of the wolf. Once again, the sins where you've adopted the sin, you've taken the sin over a weakened will. And we can see here we are, the woods of error. Here's the entree to hell right here. Then we have the vestibule, if you will, where we have the indecisive, the ones that never chose one way or the other, and they're sort of neither one place or the other. Then we have the crossing of the river Archeon, and we have Charon, the boatman, to take people across there. Then the first circle is limbo, where the unbaptized and virtuous pagans reside. Then the circle 2, the lustful, and the gluttonous, the hoarders and spendthrifts, and the wrathful. And after that, we go into the city of Dis, which is a much more intense area of hell. And we'll encounter various monsters along the way. We see 4 of them noted here. And in the vestibule of hell, as it said, are the opportunists, neither for good nor evil, but only for themselves. And that's the concept. They're not neither for you or against you. But they're definitely for themselves. They're uncommitted. They didn't choose one way or the other. And they're just there. Now, from time to time, as I've mentioned once and twice, and I'll mention again, one of the things I'm trying to show is the illustration of what a BBC writer said, that if you had never read a line of Dante in your life, you are still affected by the concepts and thoughts of Dante in the Divine Comedy. And one of the more famous lines of the Divine Comedy is one we just looked at the entrance to hell. Abandon all hope, you who go through me. Well, we see this reflected or echoed in a number of places. And here's one with a weather forecast. It says, abandon all hope, ye who venture out into this weather. It sounds pretty dreadful, that's for sure. Now, we're going back to the guys at the vestibule. That's the first people that Dante comes up to, and they're all naked. They're sinners in hell are all naked, and there are vast hordes of them. They're following these flags with blank banners that go back and forth, back and forth. They're running after them, and as they run, they're being attacked by various bugs that sting them and bite them. So we're going to look at this, and and all the other places, why is Dante putting the sinners in this state? And once again, we need to go back in a little more deeper fashion into the concept of contra passio, which is an idea that's derived from the Latin words contra and patior, which mean suffer the opposite. And basically, contra passio refers to the punishment of souls in the Dante's Inferno by a process either resembling or contrasting with the sin itself. None of the punishments of the sinners in the Inferno or the penances of the people in purgatory are arbitrary. They're there for a reason, and we have to, each time we go to a different circle, we have to discern a reason, and we won't have a correct reading of the canto. Dante didn't create the idea of contra passio, but he borrowed it from many other sources. One of the earliest sources we get of the concept of contra passio is in the Old Testament book of Wisdom. Wisdom was written about 50 BC, thereabouts, at least the first century BC, and it was in 3 parts. In one part, the author is contrasting the effect of the plagues on the Egyptians with the same element used in the plague helping the Hebrews. And he gave an example of each of the plagues and what that element did to help the Hebrews. For example, the first plague was a plague of the water turning to blood. Well, in the path in the wilderness, God created water from a rock, good water. Then you have the hailstones falling from the heaven, afflicting the Egyptians. Then, and they contrast that with the manna falling from heaven to nourish the Hebrews. And then you have all the various bugs and things flying around bothering the Egyptians, where in the sojourn in the desert you have quails flying in the air for the Hebrews to eat. And giving all these examples in Wisdom chapter 11 verse 16, the author sums it up, that the effect that they might recognize that one is punished by the very things through which one sins. And this is really a one-sentence summary of the mechanism of punishment through contra passio and the mechanism of punishment in Dante. And once again, emphasize all the sometimes grotesque occurrences in Dante aren't just to amuse us or amuse Dante. They're there for a reason, for a purpose. The very word contra passio was created by St. Thomas Aquinas in his book Summa Theologica. And Dante and St. Thomas were kind of roughly contemporaries, and several people have considered that Dante's Divine Comedy is simply St. Thomas's great work, the Summa, put into verse form. Once again, it's a word that refers to a punishment by a process resembling or contrasting with the sin itself. And through contra passio, Dante makes hell just and was able to show that God's judgment is fair. And the sinners become the embodiment of the very sins they committed while living. And once again, you asked for it, well, you got it. As this quote for Auerbach says, the sinner's punishment in hell is a continuation, intensification, and a definitive fixation of their situation on earth. And there is an irony here. The sinners in hell are given what they wanted in life, and they do not like it in its true form. And through the contrapassio, the real desires of a person is revealed and intensified rather than diminishing or altering the identity of the soul. And I should mention, I get these various slides through various sources, and these grace, and often I give the source, and I want to give the source these gray slides. These gray slides are from a talk that my daughter Sarah gave when she was in college. So thank you, Sarah. Now, let's look at this final take on contrapassio. And it's here, Hollander's translation of verse 142 takes the Italian word contrapassio and renders it fit punishment. This does and does not work for me. It's difficult to know how to fully express this, for contrapassio comes not only from the Hebrew scriptures and Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, but also St. Thomas Aquinas, where all use it to describe a sense of appropriate retribution. In today's language, it's an eye for an eye, or the punishment fits the crime. So Hollander's fit punishment gives us the general idea, but this is a much deeper and fuller concept than merely that. Our reality itself is often created by our own actions and priorities. And think about that. I'll just stop for a moment. Our reality itself is often created by our own actions and priorities. We can be just like Dante. We wake up in the dark woods of sin and error and think, how the heck did we get there? Well, we probably got there by our choices. And often there are small choices made daily. Bit by bit, we end up in the dark wood. Hopefully, we actually don't end up in the dark wood. We end up in heaven or at least purgatory, but still, it's full of our choices. And continuing from where we left off here, if competition and getting ahead is primary in our worldview, then the end we most often will find that indeed we have destroyed all competition and stand alone, literally, at the end of life. In The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis gives us several wonderful descriptions of those who have finally got things their way, to the ruin of their very beings. And I might pause there and say, sometimes then it's not a great deal to get yourself your own way. Perhaps it's better sometimes not to. Ultimately, it comes down to which will happen. We either say to God, thy will be done, or God says to us, thy will be done. In each of these circles of the commedia, each soul has finally received what they ultimately wanted. Their will has been fully realized and incarnated in their individualized contrapassio, divine retribution. That is why it's not appropriate for Dante the Pilgrim to weep at the suffering he witnesses. Ultimately, the souls receive what they most desire, for, like Frank Sinatra, they can say, I did it my way. Now, I hope this video turns up, and this is an example, a modern example from The Simpsons of contrapassio. Homer Simpson is a glutton about donuts. He makes a deal with the devil about donuts, and it turns out not to be entirely what he expected. He gets a little bit of surprise. And if you watch this, and I hope it works, you'll see that. Now, you see in the show on the Simpson little clip that Hell Labs had an ironic punishment division. Well, by Dante, by contrapposto, this would be the most or biggest division in hell, perhaps the only division. And of all things, apparently there is a action toy based on this, the Ironic Punishment Deluxe Box Set. I don't know if this is a joke or not. I don't know. Now with all this, we can go and look at the sinners starting in verse 52 or so in Canto 3. And so I looked and I saw a kind of banner rushing ahead, whirling with endless speed as though it would not ever take a stand. Behind it, an interminable train of souls pressed on, so many that I wondered how death could have undone so great a number. When I had recognized a few of them, I saw the shade of one who must have been the coward who made the great refusal. Well, one thing Dante does not do in this particular group of sinners is name anyone. And this is basically part of their contrapposto punishment. They didn't make a choice oftentimes because they were more important than the cause, or they didn't want to have any harm come to them or their personal plans. So they played it safe or played it political and didn't make a choice. With that being the case, nobody's named. People wondered who the heck is the guy who made the great refusal. Well, most scholars, not all of them, but most scholars think Dante is referring to Pope Celestine V, who reigned a couple of decades before Dante wrote the Commedia. And this person was before he became Pope, he was a great hermit. He had immense prestige because he took so great a spiritual journey and is highly respected for his sanctity. And he had founded a group of hermits and then decided that running a group of hermits was not what he wanted. So he retreated even further in the forests and hills of central Italy. Well, in about, I think 1292, thereabouts, the Pope had died and had a conclave, which is a new device, fairly new device to choose popes at this point, to decide who the successor would be. Well, they couldn't decide. They were deadlocked. They were deadlocked for 2 years. So finally, Peter Moreni, who Pope Celestine's pre-Pope name was, the hermit, sent a message to the conclave and said, God is really not very happy with you guys. You're just messing around. You need to make a choice. And one of the cardinals looked around and said, well, what the heck? Here's the choice. This guy. We should choose him. And Peter Marino the hermit, was horrified. So he tried to run away, but he was basically captured, so to speak, and made to become Pope. And he was 79 at the time. And you might suspect what would happen. He had very little political sense. And he was surrounded by intense politicians. And he was maneuvered into seemingly being the puppet of one faction. He was just being ridden back and forth. And after just a short period of this, he decided that enough was enough, and he announced that he was resigning. And this had not happened before, and this, of course, is a very rare thing. In fact, Pope Celestine V was the last pope to do this voluntarily before Pope Benedict XVI did it in our time period. There was one pope who resigned in the 15th century, but that was in part a settlement of the Great Schism. It wasn't entirely voluntary. Well, Pope Celestine, or ex-Pope Celestine, hoped that now he could go back doing what he loved, being in the mountains and praying. Well, that was not to be. His successor was Pope Boniface VIII. And Pope Boniface VIII did not think it was a great idea to have ex-popes wandering around in the forest. So he got him and imprisoned him, where he shortly died. Now, Boniface VIII is the pope that Dante absolutely despises. You remember, Boniface VIII, among other things, was responsible for Dante being an exile. So he obviously wasn't happy for the guy who resigned and caused his enemy to become pope. And also there's all kinds of rumors at the time. I don't think historians have substantiated any of them, that Boniface VIII maneuvered Celestine V to resign, that supposedly he'd come in at night and there's this, like a little horn or something in the Pope's bedroom, and he'd say in a very spooky voice, "Celestine, you need to resign. This is God talking," or something like that. And also, there are rumors that the reason why Pope Celestine V died shortly after resigning was not due to any disease or anything, but due to Boniface VIII poisoning him. Well, we just don't know. But Dante, as we know and we shall see shortly, was not a fan of Boniface VIII. But as far as the church is concerned, Celestine V is a saint, with May 19th as his feast day. He was made a saint in 1314. So, if Celestine is who Peter Moreni, who is his pre-papal name, is who Dante is referring to, then he and the church have a difference of opinion at this particular issue. So, here they are, the wretches who never were alive, were naked and beset by stinging flies and wasps that made their faces stream with blood, which, mingled with their tears, was gathered at their feet by loathsome worms. Wow, that's pretty bad. They're never alive because they never made a choice. And they're running around with this flag because, of course, they wouldn't follow any cause or flag, and the flags are blank because, once again, they never made a choice. And hence, their contra passio. Well, Dante and his guide Virgil have managed to get through the antechamber with these fellows, and now they're proceeding along. This is Canto 3, starting about 882, and suddenly, coming towards us in a boat, a man of years whose ancient hair was white shouted at us, "Woe to you, perverted souls! Give up all hope of ever seeing heaven. I come to lead you to the other shore, into eternal darkness, ice and fire. And you, the living soul, you over there, get away from all these people who are dead." When he saw I did not move aside, he said, "Another way, by other ports, not here, shall you pass to reach the other shore. A lighter skiff than this must carry you." Well, this boatman is Charon. And if we had familiarity with in Virgil's Aeneid, we would know that He is the boatman of the netherworld in that poem, transports souls to the netherworld across the river Styx. And he's not too happy with Dante being around there. He says he's alive. He also says, you shall pass another way by other ports. You shall pass to reach the other shore. A lighter skiff than this one must carry you. And this is likely to refer to the fact that the souls that are going to purgatory all assemble after they died near Rome, at the port of Ostia, and there's a boat that takes them, powered by an angel, that takes them on to purgatory. And of course, eventually they'll come to heaven. Now, Charon doesn't want to have Dante around. Well, Virgil speaks up. In my guide, Charon, this is no time for anger. It is so willed, there where power is for what is willed. That's all you need to know. These words brought silence to the woolly cheeks of the ancient steersman of the livid march, whose eyes are set in glowing wheels of fire. So, Virgil says God said it, God willed it, and there's not anything you need to know any further. And this illustrates 2 points we mentioned earlier in this talk. First of all, that God's name is never directly stated in the Inferno. And number 2, God is ultimately in control. Virgil says the boss wants it, and there's not anything you can do about it. You can just be angry or whatever you want to be, but nope. And he doesn't sound like a very nice person. Woolly cheeks, eyes set glowing wheels of fire. Wonderful. Okay, we start now again on verse 99. But all those souls there, naked in despair, changed color, and their teeth began to chatter at the sound of his announcement of their doom. They were cursing God, cursing their own parents, human race, the time, the place, the seed of their beginning, and their day of birth. Then, all packed together, weeping bitterly, they packed themselves along the wicked shore that waits for every man who fears not God. And as I mentioned, Charon is not an invention of Dante. He's a Greco-Roman phenomenon. You can read about him here. Son of Erebus, the aged and dirty ferryman of the lower world, who conveyed in his boat the shades of the dead, only those of whose bodies were buried, which of course is a theme of Antigone. If you're not buried, you're not going anywhere. Here's a picture of him. So here's Charon and all the multitude of souls taking the trip. Now, Virgil continues, my son, the gentle master said to me, all those who perish in the wrath of God assemble here from all parts of the earth. They want to cross the river. They are eager. It's divine justice that spurs them on, turning their fear they have into desire. A good soul never comes to make this crossing. So Charon grumbles at the sight of you. You see now what his words are really saying. So, first of all, he talks about justice motivating even the sinner to basically fulfill the requirements of justice. And Virgil's indirect encouragement to Dante says, well, the reason why he's upset with you is because you don't belong in hell. He, that's Virgil, finished speaking, and the grim terrain shook violently, and the fright it gave me, even now in recollection, makes me sweat. Out of the tear-drenched land a wind arose, which blasted forth into a reddish light, knocking my senses out of me completely, and I fell as one falls, tired, into sleep. Here is a artist picture of course, here's Charon taking the souls off in his boat. And here's Virgil and Dante talking about it. Now, the next slide was a video which I hope works. And this is another example of the concepts that we're talking about seeping into our culture. And this is another version of Charon used for a commercial. And thank you for listening and watching this part 3.
Please. Please, can we go back? I have money. I can pay you. Wait. Is that where we're going? I mean, that place looks amazing. Yeah. Whew. I must think I'm such a baby. I don't know. Oh, scrambles. Oh, no. The fish. Okay, Miss Bigley. Miss B. Why do you... Dolphin trainer! Dolphin trainer! I didn't want to be a dolphin trainer! Stop doing that! You go back! No, I'm right!
Dash lane,